What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to break down the 2023 rookie class. This is kind of like a first look. We're into redraft season now, but we can't forget about Dynasty and the 2023 rookie class. In my COVID state the past week, I've had plenty of time to dig into these prospects ahead of the college football season. So today I'm going to break down all the top prospects by doing a 2023 rookie mock draft, 2 rounds with each guy. I'm going to bring up some key metrics that they scored well in, all available on Patreon. This whole database that I'm getting this from will be available over there. So if you are a member over there, that'll be posted today. If you're not, link is in the description down below. But if you have plenty of 2023 firsts in some of your dynasty leagues, this video is definitely for you. So along with all the metrics that I bring up, I'm also going to bring up some of the questions that these guys have to answer for us this college football season, because they're not perfect prospects. As much as we like to look ahead to future years, rookie classes, and think that all these guys are going to be great, they definitely do have some question marks around them. So without further ado, as always, like, comment, subscribe if you enjoy. Now let's hit the intro. Okay, so the first pick, and I'll show these kind of as I go along, in the Dynasty Superflex Rookie Mock Draft for 2023, 2-round edition, is Bijan Robinson, running back from the Texas Longhorns. Bijan Robinson is just an ironclad running back prospect as they get. Prototype size, athleticism, 40% tackles avoided per attempt last year as a sophomore, ultra elusive running back, a 10% target share as a true sophomore, elite draft capital incoming. It sounds like NFL scouts are just as high on Bijan Robinson as us fantasy players are. The only question mark that he has right now is health, because he didn't stay healthy throughout the season last year. It was a wrist injury, not anything that we're too concerned about, but I have a bet on him winning the Heisman Trophy this year. I think if he closed out the season strong last year, he might have actually had a chance to win it in 2021. So at 50-1 odds, or whatever the odds that I got on him, I will definitely take that. So Bijan Robinson, clear 101, really no question marks to his game. He's a borderline perfect running back prospect. So number 2, 102 off the board, is Bryce Young. And since this is super flex, I gravitate towards the high draft capital quarterbacks. And with Bryce Young, this season is quite simple. He won the Heisman last year, continuous high level of play, 10.0 adjusted yards per attempt last season as a sophomore quarterback. Those are elite numbers. That's what, Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson were doing a couple of years ago. The only question that you can have with Bryce Young is his size, because height-wise, I think we're a little past the 5'10", 5'11" quarterbacks being too small to play in the NFL. Once Kyler Murray got drafted number 1 overall, I think that went out the window. But what I'm concerned for is his weight, because he's listed at 5'11", 194, and Kyler Murray was 5'10", but he was a thick dude. He was 205 pounds or whatever. So if Bryce Young wants to quiet some of those concerns, he'll probably have to weigh in pretty heavy at the NFL Combine or at his pro day or whatever the case is. So with Bryce Young, definitely have some weight concerns. But other than that, he's just a great quarterback prospect. So I expect him to be, top 5 NFL draft pick. And anytime you got a guy like that, top 5 draft capital, can provide a little bit with his legs, he'll probably be a high super flex rookie pick as well in the 2023 class. So 103 is the other major quarterback in this class, CJ Stroud, quarterback for the Ohio State Buckeyes. CJ Stroud doesn't have any size concerns. He's 6'3", 215 pounds, which will cause probably some NFL teams to favor him over Bryce Young because of the size concerns that they're going to have with him. His adjusted yards per attempt was 11.4, which is an absolutely absurd number. That's like 100th percentile, 99th percentile type of number. 130.8 QBR last year. He's a great passer, and he got a lot better as the season went along. I know Move the Sticks podcast talked about him getting better as the season went along. The issue for us fantasy players, for why CJ Stroud isn't necessarily, a Trevor Lawrence level quarterback prospect or something, is because he doesn't run. He only had 72 rushing yards last year and 0 touchdowns. If he can provide anything on the ground this year, he has the ability to be an elite quarterback prospect. He doesn't necessarily need to be, Konami code guy, but he just needs to show a little bit more out of structure. He's pretty much a pure pocket passer as it stands right now. And maybe they'll, force him to run a little bit more with some of his receivers moving off to the NFL. He still has Travion Henderson, and he still has, Jackson Smith and Jigba to throw to. But for the most part, I want to see him, do a little bit more with his legs if we're going to take this guy very highly in rookie drafts. Otherwise, he might get stapled with a, Mac Jones treatment from a couple of years ago. So 104 is his teammate, Jackson Smith and Jigba. And there's not much to say about him. Wide receiver from the Ohio State Buckeyes. He is in borderline Jamar Chase territory already, on paper especially, because When you just think about it, common sense wise, this dude outproduced 2 top 12 picks at wide receiver on his team. Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave both had less yards, less targets than Jackson Smith-Njigba, who is a sophomore wide receiver last year. He is absolutely a freak of nature from a production standpoint on paper. He wasn't even a full-time player last year. He had 28.14% targets per route run, which ranks third in this class, despite the guys he was competing for targets with. If he had been less, targeted or whatever, like we kind of explained away with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave this time last year, I would understand that. But Jackson Smith-Njigba just thoroughly outproduced those guys. His only knock right now is that he was an 89% slot receiver. With Olave and Wilson gone, hopefully JSN plays more on the outside, because if he does and, he's able to produce at the same level he was able to produce at playing primarily out of the slot, this could easily be, a Biletnikoff season for him, top 5, top 10 overall NFL draft pick, similar to what we saw from Jamar Chase a couple of years ago. So JSN, a prospect that I think is going to be very high on NFL teams boards, very high on fantasy players boards as well. Normally, we don't want to favor, wide receiver prospects over running back prospects if they're equal, but JSN's just in a different level, in my opinion. So 105, another wide receiver prospect, Jordan Addison, wide receiver from USC, played at Pittsburgh the last 2 years. He's basically the wide receiver version of Bryce Young. Superstar season last year. And in my opinion, he made Kenny Pickett. Every Kenny Pickett highlight tape that you watch is pretty much a Jordan Addison highlight tape as well, because Jordan Addison made so many plays for Kenny Pickett to make him look like such a great quarterback. Without Jordan Addison, Kenny Pickett does not have that season that he had last year. So Addison transfers to USC to play with Caleb Williams, who transferred over from Oklahoma. I mean, he could have went to Texas, but whatever. I'm not salty about that at all. His only question for me with Jordan Addison is his size. It looks like another Devontae Smith situation developing before our eyes as well, because he's listed at 6 foot, 175 pounds, and hopefully he puts on some size to crack 185, 190 pounds, so we don't have to deal with this bullshit again. But Jordan Addison is a phenomenal receiver. I watched a lot of Jordan Addison when I was watching Kenny Pickett for this year's draft, and I know for a fact that this dude can play. And with USC and potential Heisman contender quarterback with Caleb Williams, I think this is going to be another special season for Jordan Addison. He might be one of the first receivers to win back-to-back Biletnikoff since I believe Michael Crabtree was the last guy to do that. So I really have high hopes for Jordan Addison this year. He is my 105 as it currently stands. 106 is probably going to surprise some of you, because this guy is not as high on most people's boards as he is mine. But I have Sean Tucker, running back for Syracuse. He reminds me of like a Chris Carson-y, Nick Chubb type Javonte Williams. Like, he just has so many good traits of all those players. He might even have more juice than all of those guys too, because he has some legitimate speed. The reason I have him this high and ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs, who's most consensus-wise the RB2 in this class, is because he's got less question marks than Jahmyr Gibbs. Because, 1,500 rushing yards last year, 6.1 yards per carry, 8.3% target share, which is really good for a bigger back, 5'10", 210, 215 pounds. He's got 3 down upside, and he has very little question marks behind his name. I'd love to see him compete a little bit more as a receiver if he could get more targets on the field. That's pretty much the only question mark I have about him, though, because he had a very productive season last year. As a true sophomore, I expect him to be very good again this year and be, at least a second-round pick in the NFL draft, if not maybe a late first-round pick after a great season. So Sean Tucker, 106 for me, just a very, very safe running back prospect. I could see him being, a Javonte Williams level prospect come next year. My 107 is Kayshon Boutte, wide receiver from the LSU Tigers. He has alpha wide receiver upside, and he's definitely proven that. He leads the class in terms of his share of his team's touchdowns. When he was on the field last year, he was just scoring touchdowns left, right, and center. I believe he had 9 of 17 touchdowns for the LSU Tigers when he was on the field. Why I have him lower is basically due to injury concerns. He suffered like a partially torn Achilles last year. I believe it wasn't like an outright tear, but it is definitely a concern for him. And his ability to command targets hasn't fully been on display yet. He's got like a 21% target share in his career, but he hasn't been a 28, 29, 30% target share monster like Jackson Smith-Njigba and Jordan Addison have been in their careers. So what I want to see out of him this year is, number 1, stay healthy, and number 2, command more targets than 21.5%, which is what he had last year. So hopefully Kayshon Boutte, if he's able to do that, I mean, he's got the prototype alpha size that those other 2 guys don't. So it's possible that he ends up being the wide receiver 1 in this class when it's all said and done. 108 is Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think a lot of people will have him a lot higher than this. I have him lower than most people because despite his great numbers and he looks really good on tape, a lot of people think he looks like Alvin Kamara. I definitely agree that they're stylistically like the same type of player. 12.5% target share, 27% targets per route run. But here's the issue. This guy is listed at like 195 pounds, maybe 200 soaking wet, according to most listings that you've seen. I don't really give a fuck how good of a prospect the guy is. If he is that small, it's an uphill battle to be more than a committee running back at that size. And he's also pretty tall, too. So he's 5'11", 195 pounds. He'll probably go bonkers at Alabama this year. He transferred away from Georgia Tech. I think his weigh-in will probably be the biggest story of the NFL Combine, because if he can crack, 205, 210 pounds, he's DeAndre Swift 2.0, in my opinion. But if he's, 5'11", 195 pounds at the Combine, that's a problem for the NFL, because, we haven't seen too many running backs under 200 pounds that are RB1 caliber guys. And usually when they are, they need to be, elite receiving backs, which Jahmyr Gibbs definitely has the ability to be, but you don't want to only have that path to RB1 potential. So Jahmyr Gibbs, if you told me right now he was 210 pounds, he'd probably be the 102, 103, 104 in this class, but the size concern is definitely real for me. So the next pick that we have here is 109. Michael Mayer, tight end from Notre Dame. He isn't, Kyle Pitts level of prospect, but he is definitely a TJ Hawkinson level of prospect. 22% target share as a true sophomore, 95 targets, 840 yards, 7 touchdowns at Notre Dame this past year. He's a great tight end prospect, and he'll probably be a top 20 pick in the NFL draft to boot. And at playing a position like tight end, that's definitely really great draft capital. He's a really safe projection, in my opinion, which is why I'm comfortable having him here at 109. Maybe he doesn't go this high in actual rookie drafts by the time we get there, but I do think in tight end premium or something like that, he would definitely go this high. So the next pick here, 110, is Zach Evans. And Zach Evans is probably the first risky player that I have on this list, because Zach Evans was more or less just misused at TCU for the last 2 seasons. He transfers to Ole Miss. Now he needs to be able to carry a full workload. Could be this year's Kenneth Walker if there was a guy that, kind of came out of nowhere, even though, people know who Zach Evans is. Came out of nowhere from no production and started producing at a high level, maybe like a Heisman candidate running back. I think Zach Evans could definitely be that guy. He was the number 2 running back recruit in the 2019 running back class, behind only Bijan Robinson. So he definitely has ability. He's got good size, 5'10", 212 pounds. He definitely has the ability to be a great NFL running back prospect if he can produce this year at Ole Miss. The 111 in this draft is Will Levis, who's an older prospect. He's going to be about 24 years old on draft day next year, but he is projected to be a first-round quarterback, according to most NFL scouts that I've seen. NFL Mock Draft Database has him about a mid-first-round pick, and he had 516 rushing yards and 9 touchdowns last year. So he has some ability to move with his legs, and he has good size, 6'3", 220 pounds or whatever. So Will Levis is definitely an interesting prospect. The only problem with him, like I said, is that he's older and he's losing Wan'Dale Robinson this year from that Kentucky passing game. So if he's able to still produce at a high level without Wan'Dale, considering he's an older prospect, I think he's going to get a lot of NFL draft hype. So if he's, first round quarterback, that definitely, gets you excited about drafting him at the back end of the first round of rookie drafts. So he has the chance to make the big 2 quarterbacks into a big 3 with a big season this year. So the final pick of the first round is Josh Downs, wide receiver from North Carolina. He has an awesome profile so far. As a sophomore this past year, 144 targets, 1,335 yards, and 8 touchdowns with a 38% target share as a true sophomore. He was pretty much the only guy that Sam Howell could rely on this past year. The only issue with Josh Downs is, number 1, how does he do without Sam Howell? Because he went off to the NFL. Number 2, he's really small. He's 5'10", 180 pounds, and he looks maybe even smaller than that. Number 3, 95% of the time he played from the slot. So there's question marks with Josh Downs' game. If he was 6'2", 215 pounds, and he played on the outside, his profile is ironclad. But the problem is that he's a shifty slot receiver who just gets kind of force-fed targets. I've seen his film through watching Sam Howell this past year, who was my quarterback 1 in the class. So I definitely watched a lot of Sam Howell. So I know what Josh Downs can do. But in my opinion, if he's able to have another great season this year, he's going to be in the Elijah Moore, Tyler Lockett, Jahan Dotson territory as far as, what kind of prospect and what kind of player we can expect at the next level. I'll definitely go a bit faster for the second round, but the first pick that we have here at 201 is Quentin Johnston, wide receiver from TCU. Johnston kind of has a George Pickens feel to me. He's 6'4", 195 pounds, so tall, slender type of receiver. Doesn't separate all that well. Great in contested situations from what I've read from other people that have watched his tape. People are also scarred by TCU wideouts as well because of Josh Doxson and Jalen Reagor in recent years. People are starting to helmet scout Quentin Johnston just a little bit. But he does need to develop a little bit more of a complete game, improve as a route runner, command a little bit more targets this year. But for the most part, seems like a pretty solid bet to be a day 2 wide receiver prospect. 202 is my favorite sleeper quarterback of the class in KJ Jefferson. 99 carries, 803 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns last year for Arkansas. Go along with a 21-4 touchdown to interception ratio. He had the 3rd highest QBR in this class behind only CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. So he's basically what people want Anthony Richardson from Florida to be, in my opinion. The easy comp for KJ Jefferson is because he wears number 1. He kind of reminds you of a little bit of Jalen Hurts, but he's 6'3", 245 pounds. So he's bigger than Jalen Hurts as well. He's got like, Dak Prescott type of size, even though he's a little bit taller. The question for him is, how does he look as a passer without Treylon Burks on that team this year? If he can take a step, he could definitely be the next, Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts. And in this class with guys that don't run a whole lot, with Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, it's possible that this dude could work his way into like the top 5 overall picks in Superflex drafts once we get there this time next year. So definitely an interesting prospect in my opinion. 203 is Tank Bigsby, running back from Auburn. Down season for Bigsby in 2021. No more Bo Nix in town, thank God. But hopefully Tank Bigsby can recapture what we saw from him as a freshman, because he was really good as a freshman. He'll be a true junior this year. Good size, 6 foot, 208. But I want to see him be more of a difference maker, because he didn't really look that good this past year. Plus, he got to get involved as a receiver, in my opinion, as well. He wasn't really that involved in the passing game either. So 204 is Zach Charbonnet, who probably should have came out last year. Probably would have been like the consensus RB3 behind the top 2 guys if he did. 6'1", 220 pounds, running back for UCLA. Good size, 32.16% tackles avoided per attempt. 2nd highest PFF rushing grade in the class, only behind Deuce Vaughn, I believe. And I'd like to see more receiving work out of him as well as a senior, because he's got to improve somewhere. He should have came out last year, and if he doesn't, improve either as a runner or as a receiver, it'll probably make him coming back for his senior season kind of a stupid decision. But we'll have to see what happens with Zach Charbonnet, because I think, he's a good prospect, and he should be, the type of guy that you can get early to mid-second round with your 2023 seconds if you guys have been loading up on those type of picks. 205, Devon Achane, running back from the Texas A&M Aggies, probably the fastest player in this class. If you guys, were in on the Isaiah Spiller debates all over Twitter this offseason, you probably know who Devon Achane is. He's a speed back, kind of like a Raheem Mostert type. But the issue with Devon Achane is that, number one, we have to see what he looks like with a full workload, because he was splitting time with Isaiah Spiller for most of his career so far. And number 2, how big is he? Because he's listed at 5'9", 185 pounds. Because he's short, he can get away with being like 200 to 205 pounds, but it's definitely going to be an issue for him if he's only 190, 185 pounds going into the NFL, because he's probably limited to a committee back at that point. And at that point, I probably would not spend an early second round or a mid-second round pick on him if he's just going to be a committee back at the next level. At 206, we got Raheem Jarrett, wide receiver from Maryland. Jarrett's got a solid game and decent numbers, but I'd like to see him get a better market share of his offense, because he only had an 18.4% target share last year, 20.93% dominator. So not a guy that was commanding a huge share of his offense, but if he can take a step, he's got good size, 6 foot, 200 pounds. Just like to see him establish himself more as like a number 1 wide receiver. I know it's a lazy comp, but he kind of does look like DJ Moore out there, who also went to Maryland. So he's kind of an interesting guy that could be like a breakout candidate this year. At 207, we have Dwayne McBride, running back from UAB. This is a sleeper running back alert. I don't really know who this guy is. I didn't know who he is until I saw his metrics, but his metrics are really good. 5'11", 215 pounds. So he's got good size. 37% tackles avoided per attempt, which was second only to Bijan Robinson in this class. He's got good speed, rushing for 1,366 yards and 13 touchdowns last year on only 204 carries. He's a true junior this year, so he's not some like redshirt senior small school running back prospect. The question for him is that he only had a 2% target share, so he's not involved in the passing game at all. If he could take a step as a receiver, though, he could be a great small school prospect for you guys to get in like the mid-second round of drafts next year. I watched a little bit of highlight tape on him. He looks like he's got some juice. He looks kind of like a Chris Carson type of running back. So definitely an interesting guy in the mid-second round. And then we got another sleeper here, sleeper wide receiver alert, Jacob Cohen, wide receiver from UTEP. And again, I didn't know who this guy was, but his metrics are also really good. He's a smaller guy, 5'11", 170 pounds. So that's definitely an issue, but 30% target share, nearly 4 yards per route run, 3.73 yards per team pass attempts, which was one of the highest in the class. And he dominated his offense's production. So a guy that I think maybe not the 208 might be a little early for him, but a guy that'll probably be a good like 3rd round rookie pick who was very productive in college. So 209, Anthony Richardson, quarterback from Florida. AR-15 was a dope nickname before he decided to change it, but he definitely has a lot of upside. Only 63 pass attempts last year, and he's never started a season at quarterback, but he has a chance to become a Konami code prospect prospect if he's able to, take a step as a passer. But the only problem that I have with, some people saying that they would take him at like the back of the first round is that he was not good as a passer when he got an opportunity. 58.9 PFF passing grade, 6-5 touchdown to interception ratio, 6.6 adjusted yards per attempt. He's kind of like the Malik Willis of this class, except Malik Willis, I would argue, is an even a better passer in his first year starting than what we've seen from AR-15 so far. So, I mean, this is not looking good for him as a passer, but if he can take a big step this year, it's definitely possible that he could become, a late ascension first round type of quarterback. And then a couple more guys that I'm just going to speed through here. 210, Tyler Van Dyke, another projected, back of the first round caliber quarterback. Started as a redshirt freshman last year, 9.8 adjusted yards per attempt, fourth in the class behind CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, and KJ Jefferson. 25-6 touchdown interception ratio. Could take a big step as a passer in 2022. Not a rushing quarterback though either, more of a pocket passer. So not a ton of like Konami code guys in this class outside of KJ Jefferson and Anthony Richardson. Most of these guys are more so pocket passers. And then 211 Parker Washington kind of gives me like David Bell vibes. He's 5'11". He's 212 pounds. A guy that commanded 21% targets per route run. I'd love to see him capture a bigger market share of his offense. With Jahan Dotson now off to the NFL, the clear number one in that team. So Parker Washington could take a huge step in his junior season. Definitely like his outlook. And then finally, 212, Jermaine Burton wasn't productive at all at Georgia, transfers to Alabama. Could be this year's Jamison Williams with those guys gone to the NFL. He's catching passes for Bryce Young, so he always has upside. So that's the whole, top two rounds of the 2023 class. Like I said, if you guys want access to these databases, they will be posted on Patreon. There's plenty of metrics, more than I even mentioned in this video. Couple final takeaways from this draft class, because, we always hear things like, oh, the 2023 class is so strong, it's so deep, it's so great. Here are my real takeaways after having dug into the class a little bit more in depth than just like the surface level analysis that we've been doing to this point. The class is strong. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely strong at the top of each position. We have great quarterback prospects with the top two. We have, a really good running back prospect at the top, and then a couple good ones after him. There's a couple good wide receivers. There's like 3 or 4 really good wide receiver prospects, and then there's a great tight end prospect as well. But the quarterback class is depending on guys like Will Levis and KJ Jefferson and Anthony Richardson and Tyler Van Dyke as depth. So it could either be a shallow quarterback class with just those top two guys, or if most of those guys can take a step forward, it could be a deep quarterback class. So it's kind of, up for debate if the quarterback class is going to be good. The running back class is kind of the same thing. There's a lot of decent running back prospects after Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Sean Tucker that could make the running back class really strong or could make it fall off pretty quickly. So we'll have to see what plays out there. And then there's a lot of undersized prospects in this class. Bryce Young at quarterback, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jordan Addison, Josh Downs, Devon Achane, Deuce Vaughn, who I didn't even talk about in this mock draft because he's like 172 pounds at running back. There's a lot of undersized players in this class. So that'll definitely be an interesting narrative that plays out through next Dynasty offseason, is talking about all these undersized dudes as well. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'm still powering through COVID. So if you made it to this point in the video, leave a like, comment any of your thoughts down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Again, we're in redraft season, but I wanted to throw out a Dynasty video before we get full-fledged into the month of August. And make sure you guys, to follow all the news that's happening in training camp, make sure you follow us over there on TikTok. A lot of those videos popping off. Really appreciate you guys for the support. But with that being said, peace out, and I'll talk to you soon.